All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, we shouldn't be shocked that Eric Bieniemy left his cozy spot with the Kansas City Chiefs as their offensive coordinator, but I, for one, was surprised when the enemy decided to become the offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders. Now, this past season, with the enemy calling the plays, the Commanders were 24th in the NFL in yards per game and 25th in points per game. And following the underwhelming season in Washington, you knew the changes needed to be made. Ron Rivera was fired as the Commanders head coach after 4 years at the helm. And like I talked about it during the season, with a new ownership group in place, basically they weren't attached at the hip with anybody, including the enemy. So you knew that more changes were going to be coming, especially when Rivera was let go. And then the Commanders brought in Adam Peters as their new general manager. Now, Peters just hired Dan Quinn to be the next head coach in Washington. And Quinn, of course, is going to bring in his coaches to work with. So we've seen Quinn bring in former Arizona Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury to be the new OC in Washington, and of course, that has left Bieniemy as the odd man out there. Now, in my opinion, okay, going to Washington for Bieniemy was a miscalculated risk because I do agree that he needed to leave the shadow of Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, as he's basically at a stalemate when it comes to landing a head coaching gig in the National Football League. But going to the nation's capital was not a wise move. Now, in 3 seasons prior to Bieniemy going to Washington, the Commanders' offense was never a juggernaut. It was near the bottom of most offensive categories under Rivera, and it was going to be a tall task going ahead. If this was year one for Ron Rivera as the Commanders' head coach, and he brings in Bieniemy, okay, this could possibly work. But you figure Bieniemy's trying to help a culture change in Washington because this is a franchise that has been accustomed to losing and not succeeding for a very long time. You come in, you've got a bad offensive line, you've got a young quarterback in Sam Howell to work with, and it was a recipe for disaster. In 17 games this season with the Commanders, Sam Howell was sacked 65 times. That is nearly 4 sacks per game, double that for the amount of times that he's hit. Now, I'm going to put some of that on the offensive line, but I'm also going to put some of that on Sam Howell as well. So my point is leaving Kansas City, fine, I'm all for that, but you needed to go someplace where you had an opportunity to succeed, and I never saw that coming for Bieniemy in Washington. To me, also, in my opinion, I really feel that Bieniemy going to Washington was kind of like one of those things. Well, you know what? I could be the OC in here. Ron Rivera is probably going to get fired. Maybe I could just ease my way in to the head coaching seat, but that clearly did not work out. I think if the offense had been much better this past season, if the offense had shown more promise this past season, I think that was something that could have been addressed. But when you're near the bottom in major offensive categories as the OC, you know what? It's not a recipe for you to keep your job there. So it's also not helping the enemy's case that the Chiefs, in their first year without him, calling the plays, they're currently 60 football minutes from winning their third championship since 2020. And it's one of those where, you think about Andy Reid. Andy Reid's a Hall of Fame head coach. Patrick Mahomes is arguably the best quarterback in the game right now. So it's one of those things where you know what, they're not gonna have a big hiccup with losing somebody like the enemy, but the fact that in their first year without him, they still have a good chance to go out there and win another championship is definitely not going to help the enemy's case going forward. So I'll tell you like this: I really think it would be a reach to see Bieniemy become a head coach in the NFL anytime soon. I don't know if he just doesn't interview well. I don't know if he rubs people the wrong way. I just simply don't know. But the bottom line is, it has not worked out for him to be a head coach, in spite of the fact that he has gone on multiple interviews, been finalist for head coaching jobs around the league, you name it. But it's one of those. The other question is, will he get another shot to be an offensive coordinator in the National Football League? I absolutely think so. It's one of those where right now there's only two offensive coordinator positions open. You got the Los Angeles Chargers, who just hired Jim Harbaugh to be their head coach. And then you have the Seattle Seahawks, who brought in Mike McDonald, the former Baltimore Ravens defensive coordinator. Would one of them reach out to Bieniemy? I don't know. Bieniemy might possibly sit out this season. Would he go back to college and work there? I'm not sure, because we've seen a trend where more coaches, regardless of if it's a head coaching position, coordinator position, whatever, they're making the jump from the college game to the NFL game, and I'm going to talk about that, in the coming days. But nonetheless, maybe Bieniemy just takes 2024, sits back, recharges those batteries, and comes back fresh for 2025. Because it's not like there's not going to be jobs available in the National Football League calling plays. Maybe Eric Bieniemy is just one of those guys that's always going to be an assistant coach in the National Football League. It just works out for some people like that. But nonetheless, I really thought that it was a risk, a bad risk for him, to go to Washington. It's one of those where they've been a disaster waiting to happen. And when you have a team that has been as bad as the Commanders have been for so long, you can't just flip a switch and think you're going to turn it around. So for Bieniemy, I'm not surprised that he's not the OC in Washington anymore. Once the Commanders brought in Dan Quinn, I could see the writing on the wall, and Bieniemy should have seen that too. It's the nature of the game. It's the business that is the National Football League, and let's just see where Eric Bieniemy will be calling home in the NFL next. I do believe he'll get another job. When and where, we just simply have to wait and see. But folks, that's going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you haven't already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.